invest in people in the long term, there has to be a mutual understanding.
Hustle hard, hustle hard. Closed mouths don't get fed. Thinking strategically, but acting like a gorilla is the kind of marketing that's small. When it innovates very little, it's highly risk averse. It indicates
particular situations, competing interests can complicate the management process, creating tension and sometimes leading to conflict. So just think through this for a moment. You have a sister that you're in business with. And so say you're a brother, so you're a man, and your sister and you do business together. And your sister is 7 years younger than you. And your sister studied marketing in college. And your sister wants to build, and you're in a, let's just say that you're in the grocery delivery business. And your sister studied marketing, and she has a plan and an idea for her future and her family and where she wants to live and where she wants to grow the business through like her marketing lens and her 7 years younger than I am lens. And so I have already have a marriage, I already have a family, I have three girls, and I'm situated in where I want to be. And I have a different plan for this. I want to keep it local. I want to keep it fairly small because I want it to kind of fit into my interest of growing in accordance to my lifestyle. So you have these two different worldviews essentially. One is kind of trying to grow and scale and possibly bring the business up to New York one day and through major marketing campaigns. And the other one is just sort of situated in its existing environment, not wanting to grow at rapid speeds and wanting to try to be more conservative with the growth of the business. So these are different interests. And when you have different interests, it can complicate things because neither one of those interests are necessarily wrong, but I'm sure you can get the idea of how those different interests can really breed conflict within an organization. And sometimes, and you'll notice that often throughout the text in chapter 5, that it has this general question. I'll kind of ask this question to the group now to get you thinking. But is it wise to go into business with a family member that you have a good relationship with? Or is it wise for you not to go into business together because it could potentially destroy the relationship? Which do you think is a more formidable answer? And the trust factor is a huge one, and sharing those values is a big deal. And so that's awesome because you have terms, you have procedures, and you have things that need to be followed, and you might have minor disagreements with those copyrights and the music stuff. But if you can accomplish smaller projects together and you can do it fairly at ease, it's sort of a test grounds to whether or not you'll work well together moving forward, because there's no doubt that there'll be major decisions to make that will force us to somehow collaborate or attempt to collaborate or compete and get into conflict. So how we handle those small discussions is kind of a glimpse into how we handle those larger ones. I don't necessarily have an opinion on this question because it's a tough one to be firm on because it's contingent on the person and the circumstance and the opportunity and all this kind of stuff. But my father and I were in business together for 25 years. And when I say in business together, I was an employee of my father for about 18 of those 25 years. And me being an employee of my father, he always spoke to the business as if it was mine. And so he had this thing called a golden parachute where he had a life insurance policy on me that if I passed away, I would, go to my descendants and all this kind of stuff, which was cool. And then in addition, he would demonstrate to me that he has essentially a savings account that he's building up that the company owns. That one day when I decide to, let's say, buy the company from him or whatever that may be, that he would take those funds and it would contribute towards buying the company. So he always had this tempting nature of keeping me in the business because I had other opportunities that I could pursue. But he spoke to me as if I had already owned it, and he set up my compensation package to really draw me in. But the fact of the matter is, I was not an owner of the company for 18 years. My father and I were not business partners. I was the president of his organization. I still didn't own the business. It wasn't until about 3 years before we sold the business. So this was in like 2020 that he gifted me 20% of the organization, just basically mostly because he wanted to leave Florida and go live in Pennsylvania. And I refused to run the company without equity in it. But of course, other things. And it was a major gift. It was a major step in our relationship. And he didn't want to do it because he knew it would create tension. He knew that if I became an owner, that he would have to come to me and ask for approval on certain things. And he could not stomach doing that because he was my father. And he's not going to go to his son and say, "Oh, can I please buy a new vehicle?" He's not going to do that. Was unwilling to take our father-son relationship and transition into a partnership, a true partnership, for many reasons. And a lot of it was psychological. And candidly, I thought it was probably the right thing to do because I don't think I was mature enough to enter into that partnership with my father until I was, 35 years old. So that's kind of my personal story about, yes, was I working with my father? Of course. But was I business partners with my father? Was I owning the company alongside of my father? Not necessarily, but I was treating it as if it was mine the entire time. So this is a cool chart. And I'll ask some more questions as we go. But if you think about it, if you think about these different relationships within the company, family members is an influential role within the business, even if they're not actively involved in the business. So if I owned a business 100% and my wife was my wife and she came into the company just for like a visit or just to kind of like peep around, everybody knew she was my wife. They'd almost treat her as if she was an owner. So you get the point that, just because they're not an owner, but they are still a family member, they have like their own category. And so then you have the owners. So we'll move to employees next, actually. So these are non-family employees, pretty basic. They're not a part of the family that owns the business, and they are not owners of the business. These are employees. So that's category two here in the circle. Category three are non-family owners. So this is an interesting one. So I'm not a part of the family, and this is category three. I do not, my last name is not Kershner, but I own the business. So that's another interesting aspect too. You have a couple family members, and you have a non-family member owner, not involved in operations of the business, and that's even more interesting. That they're not involved in the day to day, but they still have an ownership stake in the business. Then you have number four, a family member employee, not an owner. So this is an interesting. So this was me. This was my category number four, where I was my father's son, and I was essentially an employee, but I wasn't an owner. So that number four is also another category. And maybe you see yourself in these positions, or you see yourself in these roles. So it's fun to understand the differences. You think it's a family business, you're either a family member or you're not a family member. No, it's more, there's more of a dynamic in that. Number five is a family member owner, not involved in operations of the business. So this would be, for instance, with the example of my wife, is that if I was the CEO of the company and my wife was an owner, but she was not involved in the day-to-day activity, but she did own a portion of the business. My uncle actually has it set up this way where he is the CEO of the company and his wife is a 20% owner, but she participates in nothing of the company. She doesn't run the operations or anything. She's just an owner. She doesn't do the day-to-day operations. And I have an ownership stake in our family business right now that we partner with a private equity company where I'm not in day-to-day operations, but I'm still an owner. And I still see staff members that work for my company, at church and in the community. And I'm not like, hey, how's work and how's my business and this kind of stuff. No, but at the same time, I do have a stake and equity in their work, and I'm interested in what they're doing. And the dynamic is a little bit different. So that's a fascinating one. So number six is an employee owner. I think this is a great one to be, is that I work in the company and I also own the company. That's pretty clear. But as you can tell, people think like this is the only thing. Of course, if you own the company, work in the company, that's not always the case. So it's an employee owner, not a member of the family. So it's employee owner, not a member of the family. That's caveat there. I didn't put that in there. But a family member, owner, and employee. So this is the most obvious one here. I should have been circling it the whole time. So this is a family member, owner, and employee. So I'm a family member. My last name is, let's see if I can put someone else's last name in the context here. My last name is, let's say Perez for DJ. My last name is Perez. And I'm also an owner of the business. And I also work in the business. A family member, owner, and employee. So this is Perez Company. Perez Company, here's Deja working the whole time. And then, of course, Deja has, number one, family members not involved in the business. So Deja has a sister. So this is sister here. Sister is a family member of Deja, who is currently a family member, owner, and employee. But of course, she, by the way, still has influence over her sister. Like she still is a family member and she still can come into the business and still have some clout in a sense because it's Deja's sister, but she's not an employee and she's not an owner. And then I'm not going to run through this whole thing again, but non-family employees. So these are people who work for Deja over here, non-family owners, not involved in operations of business. So these are just distant owners. This would be like me, over here with my 2% stake. I'm not a family member of Deja, and nor am I in operations, but I still own a piece of the business. A family member employee, not an owner. So if Deja has a brother that works for her and doesn't own the business, so this would be number four. This would be right here. That is like the VP of sales. That would be Deja's brother. A family member owner not involved in operations of the business. So this would be Deja has, let's say, a husband, but the husband owns the company. The husband owns 20%, but Deja's husband, Mr. Perez, is just kind of hanging over here with his 20%. He's not doing anything in the business. Then you have an employee owner, not a family member. So you have an employee, number six here, right here. This is Deja's business partner, not related to Deja whatsoever. So this is not a Perez, but also an owner and also somebody who works in the company. That's an interesting dynamic. An employee owner, not a member of the family. Then, of course, so that's what we just talked about there. And then a family member, owner, and employee, and that is Deja. So you can see the dynamics. It's interesting. I spent time there because it's really interesting to see how some of that plays out and to understand that it's all different. The relationships are different. The tensions can be different. So yeah. So all right, we have advantages and disadvantages of family businesses. This is a big one. So there's some great things with running and owning and working with family businesses. And mind you, Walmart's a family business. There's a lot of companies out there that are family businesses that we may not think are family business. The book talks about Eats Sausages is a funny one that had an interesting commercial for the Super Bowl. And it's a family thing is a theme. Okay, some advantages of working in a family business may promote the family's values to set themselves apart from competitors. This is a big deal. I'll give you a little bit of a taste of some of those values that we baked into our organization in this video. I wanted to show you that video just to kind of show you the values that we baked into our organization. And as you can see, we could do that. My father and I were able to drive our character and things that we found important to the staff members and then also to the customers. And it was felt because it was true, it was genuine. And those are things that set us apart from our competitors, period. Like there were good places to work in the Keys, but they were nothing like Reef Tropical. If you wanted to work in pool service and you came and worked with us at Reef Tropical, we treated you with respect, we trained you up, but we had high standards and we paid you well. We gave 401k, we gave medical benefits, we gave paid time off, all this kind of stuff, overtime, you name it. And you could make a decent living as a pool technician at Reef Tropical. Other organizations, maybe not so much. But again, we had high standards. And that, as you can see, resonated through the way that we operated on a day-to-day basis. So we conveyed a sense of tradition and achievement to relatives who are considering joining the firm and to non-family employees who have become part of the story. These are advantages. Potential disadvantages. It's funny, there's only two. Conflict may arise among family members. And then there's nepotism, this classic word, the practice of employing relatives. So the conflict aspect, what you don't see in those videos is that my father and I would work together literally next to each other in the same office, 5 feet away, not even 5 feet away, for 7 years straight, every single day. And I love it because now my father and I's bond is great, but we would have arguments in the office. And there's a lot of times where I would, unfortunately, I wasn't honoring and respecting my dad the way I needed, but I was very passionate about what I was doing. And we would argue and people would hear it. We would close the door, but of course they'd hear it anyways. So there was a lot of conflict and strain on our relationship at times. We were very good at kind of closing the door, metaphorically and pun intended, to the shop at night, and then not taking that stuff into our personal relationship. And we were both competitive, so we understood what we do at work is just different than how we treat each other when we're having a burger on a Friday night. But at the same time, it's hard not to have some contention there, like some bitterness towards the people you're working with because you're disappointed in them in some kind of way. And of course, my father was disappointed in me. So inevitably, conflict may arise. I'd say conflict will arise among family members if they're in business long enough. And this whole concept of nepotism is you don't hire a person based on meritocracy. You don't hire them based on a resume. They don't go through the same process that everyone else has to go through to get their references called and they have 3 interviews. You hire them because they're your brother. You hire them because they're your sister. You hire them because they're a cousin. And therefore, that is considered to be nepotism, meaning just because they're a family member, now they're treated differently. They're sort of put in this special category. And therefore, they don't have to do some of the stuff that the typical employee would have to do. And that it would be classic nepotism. And when that happens, it's tough. It happens all the time. And it's not always necessarily a bad thing, especially if people are competent and capable of doing the job well. But it can be perceived by staff members as not okay. And certainly if the person comes in as incompetent or is draining resources on the organization, that's going to be a problem because then you potentially have to fire somebody that you're related to, which is tough. And other people in the organization can see that this person is not representing the organization well, and they're just here because they're Johnny's brother or something like that. It's not always a good thing. So the positives, this is a fun one. Trust among family members is actually a good thing, meaning that at least I know that you're my family member and I've known you for 10, 15 years. And I know that we at least have a general care for one another. And so there's an element of trust that's already previously built up. Loyalty to the family by those within the firm. I know that my last name is going to be my last name today and for the next 20 years. So what happens here at work, like I said, we can leave it at the door, is that you're always going to be my father. You're always going to be my brother. You're always going to be my sister. And to say from your perspective that there's a level of loyalty to the business and also to the family that is there, that can be a very positive thing. And let me tell you something, it's not always easy to find that kind of loyalty with staff members. I'm watching the series on Netflix. It's not very it's sort of R-rated series. It's called The Witcher, and it's a fascinating one, and I'm kind of into it. And there's different races. There's like elves and humans, and then there's monsters. And the elves are trying to build this loyalty with they're called the Nilfgaardians. Anyone who's watched it, and so the elves are kind of buddying up next to the humans, and they have this feud, this long-lasting feud, and they're playing nice with one another. But the human leader is being advised, like, listen, you can say what you want to say, that they're your friend and all this kind of stuff, but they're going to look out for their own. And in essence, what happens is that is the case. Like, because they're loyal to their own family, they're choosing family over friendship. And so I'm going back to this whole having an employee versus a family member. There could be both positive and negatives, but one of the positives I'm trying to bring out is that that they're at least loyal to you, that they truly will commit something to you, and they'll take their shirt off their own back, and they'll bleed for you, and they'll do things for you that the basic friends or just basic employees wouldn't necessarily do. So the commitment to the firm by all family members, knowledge among extended family members, long range thinking by leaders of the firm, close communication among family members. So because we're a family, we're sharing knowledge of one another. We also can talk to our aunts and uncles about the business, and they care, and they want to speak life into our business because they want us to be successful. So we sort of, just because they're family members, they're not an owner, but they still have sort of a stake in our success. So that there is an element of trust there because they're family members, even though they're not owners. So the negatives is mistrust by non-family employees of incompetent family members. We talked about that. Sorry, incompetent family employees. Lack of loyalty to the firm by family members not directly involved in the business. Sense of entitlement by the succeeding generation and those not working in the firm. I'll be honest with you, I definitely, I'll say suffered from, but experienced an entitlement mindset for a decent amount of time, especially once I got my once I got my teeth into the firm and I started building systems and I started building the marketing channels, I started hiring staff members and building a team. I really helped scale this organization. I'm sure you can see that in me right now. And I did a lot of the hard work. And then when I would go to try to like make a monster decision that I wanted to like buy another business or I wanted to, increase my salary, 20%, and I was met with pushback, I felt like, wait a minute, you have no idea what I do and all these stuff that I did. So yes, I might have some credence in saying that, but the reality is I felt entitled, and that is a wrong posture to have. And that entitlement did not sit well with my father. And of course, my father pushed back against that. And so that feeling of entitlement, and it was a tough season when I had those feelings. I was able to work with a leadership coach to kind of help me through that, just to kind of finish that story. Lack of knowledge among those family members outside the firm, demand for instant gratification from those who feel entitled, about that. Failure to communicate across generations and with family not involved in the firm. So my brother is 18 now. He's going to college at Penn State University up in Pennsylvania. I'm very grateful to have a brother, but he's young. And my brother and I will eventually get into the conversation about, the business and, his role in business and what that looks like. And, maybe we can build a business together. And he certainly will want to know about stories about my father and I in business together. And he kind of missed out on that opportunity. And so what I'm trying to say there is this like succession of the next generation and being able to bring my brother into these conversations should be had so we can continue the legacy of our organization over time. So co-owners are couples who own and manage businesses. So this is a very interesting because I just think about the dynamics of say a marriage or even just a really tight boyfriend girlfriend relationship or whatever relationship it might be, that you are cohabitating and you are sharing a lot of things together and you are possibly raising children together and spending a lot of time together, and then you're also building a business together, and everything changes when you start building something. So this is a caution to anybody out there that's looking to go into business with a spouse or a significant other. There's good things, but there also could be potential detrimental things to both the relationship and the business. So advantage is opportunity to work with someone you really trust and to share more of your lives together. How beautiful does that sound? Sounds beautiful, right? It sounds like a fairy tale in some sense, but it could be lived out. Truly, I know a lot of people that are husband and wife that own a business together and they make it work. Like they have their zone of comfort over here, and this person has a zone of comfort over here, and they make it work. They've figured out a partnership in the business. The disadvantage is differences of opinion about business matters can carry over into family life. Like it's enough for my wife and I to have issues with raising our kids or dealing with financials of just our home in general, than to be able to go into work every day and build departments together. That'd be a lot. The energy of both parties may be so spent by working long hours in a struggling company that little zest remains for a strong family life, and there can be too much togetherness. Too much togetherness. Interesting. Instead of like going out and like hunting and gathering, you're constantly together and you're constantly feeling kind of attached in a way. And I was thinking about this idea is if the business isn't doing well and there's financial stress, if you have one spouse that is running the business and the other spouse sort of has this bipartisan-ish, like they want it to do well, but they're not as embedded in the success of the company because they're not owning and operating it, they can give like unbiased advice. Like being detached from the business actually could be a good thing of a spouse or a partner when a particular spouse or partner is struggling with the business. Like they can give this you know different kind of advice. I'm trying to think of a term that would phrase this properly. They're not in every day, they're not embedded in the everyday business, so therefore they can give this unbiased third party advice, which is really cool. If they're both stuck in this struggle of the business and they're both dealing with the day-to-day problems, it's very difficult for them to talk through that. They almost need a third party to come in and help them figure out these conversations. And so that's just a little side note of some positives and negatives. Parents as founders, entrepreneurs take various approaches to prepare successors in the next generation for ownership and leadership, demonstrating the founder's commitment to both business and family through both actions and words, supporting entrepreneurial behavior by the children, letting them take calculated risks and encouraging them to learn from failure. These are things that parents as founders do for their children, supporting educational efforts towards skills for leading the business while helping the children to develop their own special talents. So part of the ownership structure that I negotiated with my father was budgeting funds so that I can go back and get a doctorate degree in business administration. So in 2020, my father was a big advocate of me actually going back and getting a doctorate degree. And he knew the business owner, this guy's name is George Marakis, across the street, that was also coincidentally the director of the FIU DBA program. Amazing, amazing professor. Dr. G is his nickname. George Marakis. He's actually pretty well known. If you know Chrome Avenue, there was a motorcycle shop there, right across from our building, between Palm and Chrome, and it's right near Cracker Barrel. But that was his motorcycle shop. And so I walked in there one day and I sat down and talked to him just because he was a neighbor of ours. And I told him who I was, introduced myself. Here's the business. I'm just happy to meet you. Nice to be neighbors. We had a good conversation about business, about life, and this kind of stuff. And then I left to go out about my day. And then he actually reached out to my father and said, "Hey, I think your son would be a great candidate for our doctoral program." And so then when I was exploring doctoral programs, FIU came up. I went to my father, started talking about it, and said, "Hey, go back over there and talk to this guy, George Marakis." I went back over there, and George Marakis kind of sold me on the program. My father and I were on the same page, and it was a fairly substantial expense. It was, like a $15,000 a year, if not more, burden on the organization. But the organization paid for me to go back to school and get a DBA, and I thought that was an amazing situation. And my father advocated for that, so that could very well be a strong benefit of going into business with a parent, because they could very well want your educational efforts to continue. Helping the children recognize that rules and responsibilities have their place in both business and life. Whoa. I mean, the stuff I learned through watching my father deal with business, watching my father make sure all of the vendors got paid, making my father lived by just a code of ethics like you wouldn't believe. He didn't lie. He couldn't lie. You could tell, you could read him like a book. Like he just put it all out there. And he was very genuine with who he was. And he told you the truth. He told you how it was. There was no secrets. And he paid everybody he owed money to. And he asked people of the same. He asked for respect. He asked to treat people as they would want to be treated, and that other people, you know, first, so watching this over the years and being a part of this with him was truly an amazing experience. And I have a lot of different podcasts and conversations with my father about the things that I've learned from him over the years. And of course, this is if a child has that kind of relationship with a parent, it could be a good thing. Experts recommend introducing children to the family firm at an early age. In the entrepreneurial family, the natural tendency may be to push a child either openly or subtly in that direction of the family business without considering child's talent, aptitude, and temperament. So there's always sort of this lingering pressure to sort of, what are you going to do? Are you going to work for the family company? Are you going to help your mother? Are you going to help your father? Are you going to help your sister? If they own a business, are you going to work with them? And so this will always be a conversation. For those of you that have family members that own businesses, or maybe you have a business and you have a family member that just has a job, get ready to answer these questions, because people are always going to be asking these questions. Anytime I go and visit an entrepreneur and they're looking to sell their business or grow their business, I always ask them, do you have a son? Do you have a daughter? And I can always see right away how their relationship is with their son and daughter by their next response. They say, "Yes, I have a son, and he's not going to work here." Okay, that's interesting. And I think I had explained this to you in the past, but that the sensitivity involved with, either they're not good enough or they're not interested, which now there's some bitterness, or, maybe I'll bring them in, but that's going to be my decision. I'm in charge, and that's my kid, and not sure what I should do there. So in a society that values the right of the individual to choose their own career, if this value is embraced by the child, then he or she must be granted the freedom to select a career of their own choosing. Do you believe that if you have a parent that owns a business and it's a pretty successful business, and you definitely are on a trajectory to be an employee of the company and potentially an owner one day, do you think it's a good idea to finish your school and to go work directly for your family business immediately after you're done school? Or should you get experience for like 3 or 4 years in another company and prove that you can be successful somewhere else and then come join the firm? Which of those paths do you think is better? And sometimes the interesting thing is you can't choose the industry that your family is operating in, because possibly the parent chose the industry on your behalf. So yeah, you'll be in it, but at the same time, I'm not specifically speaking to your situation, Sabella, but to other people that maybe that industry is, you're going to settle for it because that's what the family business is in, but it's not necessarily the industry you thought that you would be working in. So that's an interesting one too. But because you're a sibling, or because you're a son or a daughter, like, here we go. I guess I have to like this industry now because that's what everyone else is doing. And back to what Panita said about starting from the ground up, I think that's a really, really wise advice, because that will not only build your credibility. So let's say you come in, you have no other experience from any other company, and you come in and you're immediately like the vice president of operations. People are going to be like, what do you, clearly there's nepotism going on here. Like, you have no idea what we're doing. You don't know how our day-to-days work. You've never done the job yourself. And now you're just coming in as the VP, and you're now the boss because you're so-and-so's cousin or friend or brother, whatever. So that's a posture that maybe you can come in and be that position. But what would be wise for you to do over the next 6 months is not tell anybody what to do, and to just ask questions and do the job yourself. Go out there, do the work, be on the floor, get your boots dirty, get your hands dirty, and be with the people who get the job done. And then you will learn a lot. And then when you get to the point where you're supervising and managing people on the front line, you understand, you're compassionate, you're empathetic, and also you're not going to let things get past you. Meaning, people can't BS you. And this is a big deal. Like, if somebody says to you, "Oh, well, that job is hard," you say, "No, it's actually not, and I did it, and I know it only takes 20 minutes, and it took you 45. So what's up?" And you're like, "Oh, dang, this person actually knows what they're talking about." And so that will build your credibility, and it'll make it a little easier for you to make decisions and to decide, who's telling you the truth and who's not. So that was a good point, Benita. So interesting question. And I'll just say again, from my perspective, there's no right or wrong answer. I went 4 years outside and made a career in commercial real estate. And then I went back to school and got a master's degree in business administration with a concentration in entrepreneurship. And then I started two of my own companies. And so it was about 5 years away from my father, where I was fully self-sufficient, living on my own, not supported whatsoever from my father, paid for my master's degree completely myself. And then I decided to join my father's company. And in doing so, I believe that I brought a level of credibility to the operation. Of course, prior to that, like when I was in high school and when I was in college, all of my summer jobs were with my father, and I was building pools, cleaning pools, doing the landscaping, all of that kind of stuff, that on the ground, boots on the ground kind of stuff. So that when I came in a couple years out of professional career that I had already made some success in, I had confidence. And sometimes that confidence like was too much. Like I felt like I was going from corporate America to now small business, and I needed to adjust my approach a little bit. But that was the way I went about it. But that's not always the right way. In-laws and outlaws of the business. In-laws play a crucial role in the family business, either as direct participants or as sideline observers. So this would be a father-in-law, a mother-in-law, a brother-in-law, a sister-in-law. You get the idea. The entrepreneur's partner. Not all couples are co-preneurs. A frequent and stressful role performed by an entrepreneur's partner is to serve, this is a fascinating one, as a mediator in business relationships between the entrepreneur and the children. Very fascinating one. So my stepmom played this role for us often because my stepmom was my as my stepmom, and was my father's wife. She would often obviously not take the side of, but be a little bit biased towards my father, but she would listen to me. She would understand. She would advocate on my behalf towards my father when we would have disagreements, and she certainly did play a role in listening to our stories. One of the interesting things was that if you have a family business, and a lot of times a spouse or a friend or significant other, they only hear the negative, and they only hear the negative because somebody needs to vent at the end of the day, and they tend to get the negative stories. But when good things happen or when that negativity has gone away, it's not like we go back to the person we vented to and like, oh, by the way, everything I vented to, everything's fine now, everything's good. So the person that is receiving the venting about the family business has a negative opinion about it because they're only hearing these bad stories. So it's something to consider if you're working in a family business or you're working even in a toxic environment and you're constantly talking to your spouse about the negative things. If those negative things get fixed or get turned around, it's probably good to go back to that person and say, hey, by the way, things are better now. So as opposed to just laying another negative story on them 2 weeks later. Non-family employees in the family firm. Non-family members are often discover that they have limited opportunities in family firms. It's an interesting one. So if you're working for a family company and the family has 4 or 5 different family members that are working there, they're most likely occupying positions of influence and power within the organization, one would think, and therefore there's limited growth potential or there's limited promotion potential. So the people that are talented staff members that probably could be a vice president of operations, a CFO, a president of the company one day, those positions are occupied by family members, so it's going to be very difficult for those family members to churn their family members. So the talented staff members might leave the organization. The leader of a family-owned enterprise might decide to bring in a non-family member as an executive with the firm for the following reasons. So I did this. I brought in a CFO, paid him a fairly substantial salary, more than anybody in the whole firm. He was very talented, and he had a lot of control over the company as well. He actually entertained the concept of being an owner himself. It was very interesting, and I was betrayed by this person, unfortunately. Long story there, but he was good at what he did, and he served his purpose, and he certainly, I considered him very much a friend. Unfortunately, because of the betrayal, we've split, no longer friends. But anyways, that was, I don't know if that was a good decision to bring in a non-family member. I don't know, but he was an executive of our firm to bridge the gap between generations. He definitely bridged the gap between generations because he was about 6 or 7 years older than me, and he was obviously like 20 years younger than my father. But still, he spoke to my father maybe a little bit differently than I did, and he did mediate some of those tensions as well, to set a new direction for the firm, to deal with change, to provide new skills and expertise. I mean, yeah, he yes to all of those. So it was actually, now I think about it, it was a good decision for about 2 years. So sometimes it's good. I'm going to kind of not spend a lot of time on this slide, but this is saying that sometimes families need to get away from the business and they need to go on a retreat. And in retreat, an informal gathering of family members, usually at a remote location, to discuss family business matters. I worked with as a client this family that there was a mother and father who both owned the business, and a son who owned a portion of the business, and they were trying to transition some equity over to another son. But they actually had 3 sons, and one of them had no interest in the business, but was still a part of the conversation. And they had every Sunday, they would get together and have dinner, and they would call it like their family council. And they would talk about business matters. They would talk about the company, and they'd spend like a couple hours at the dinner table on Sunday night. And they were intentional together, talking about the future of the organization. So that was fascinating to hear about that. My father and I certainly didn't have that intentional time. We just talk about it whenever. But anyways, family council, an organized group of family members who gather periodically to discuss family-related business issues. Family business constitution, fascinating one. I wish we would have done this, but we didn't. And obviously, our business wasn't that big. So it's a statement of principles intended to guide a family firm through times of crisis and change, sometimes called a family creed. I think it would be a cool thing to have. Documents the mission, values, philosophy, and principles that govern the family business. I mean, obviously, we had these mission, values, philosophies, and principles, but it was for the entire company. It wasn't just for our family. But I think this is one really just for the family in general. Family talent. The question is, are the people in our family being groomed? Are they growing and learning along with the company? Are they going to be able to make it? Do they have the talent and the competencies to be successful here? Are we developing them? So is the son of the owner the right person to succeed the owner as the leader of the company? And these are tough questions because there's certainly a nepotism and a bias. Like I want my daughter to be the owner of the company, but maybe my daughter doesn't have the skills. And maybe somebody else who's a non-family member is better equipped to be the leader of the company. What do you do in a situation like that? Hire a non-family member because they're more competent and they can do the job better to then be the boss of the family member? Do you train the family member? Do you fire the family member? You know, do any of the children want to take over the business? Question mark. How do we choose between equally capable children? You just have them duke it out. Whoever wins. Will they become good leaders, or will the company suffer due to their weak leadership skills? Will the successors collaborate in the future, or will they engage in sibling rivalry? How do we nurture the needed competencies to take the business forward? How will we support those who want to pursue a career outside the family business? Fascinating. So preparing the next generation, transition of ownership. This is a fascinating one. Is formally going about taking ownership. And like my father, it was very simple. This took 2 hours of time. We engaged our legal counsel, who's been a lawyer for a long time. We took the certain number of shares, which was on a piece of paper, stocks essentially, and all we did is sign a few documents, and boom, the next day I was 20% stock owner of the organization. Didn't take any time at all. But that is not typical. A lot of times they have like a buyout program that will last maybe over 2 years, where a son or a brother would progressively buy out an owner to become an owner, or you could potentially sell an entire venture at the same time to a family member. So how do we transfer ownership? What are some things to take into consideration? Certainly getting a lawyer to help deal with some of these conversations would be very important. The tax considerations are a big deal. By the way, if you were to sell your shares as opposed to gift your shares, it's a different tax bracket. And also, if you were to sell all your shares at one time versus over the next like 5 or 6 years, that's a different tax conversation too. So there's a lot of different tax considerations to take into consideration when making these transfer of ownership decisions. And people who specialize in just that, the tax ramifications of capital gains, arranging personal holdings to create wealth outside the business as well as within it, reflecting seriously on family talents and interests as it relates to the future of the firm. There's a lot of opportunities to buy an existing business. And when you buy an existing business, there's a lot of good things that come from it. What are some good things that come from it? Well, it's less risky. It's just like buying a franchise because you know that there's a history of operating success, somewhat of a history of operating success. So, but there also is a lot of due diligence research that you have to do to realize, well, what kind of existing business do I want to buy? Are they sharing the information? Where do I go and find this information? What questions should I ask this existing business owner? How much does the business cost? What is the financing or the terms of the deal? How much do I have to pay in cash? How much can I borrow? How much is the owner willing to possibly write me a note saying that I owe him money over the next 5 or 6 years? All of this is negotiable, by the way. So what the fascinating thing about going to an existing business owner is there's a high likelihood they want out. Right? They don't want to do it anymore. So you're already a leg up because to them, you're a way out. So if you see this business, you get information, you see that this might be a business you want to buy, you don't have to put a lot of cash in. Just like a franchise I was explaining, you can figure out how to make this work. You can have terms to the deal. So if you do have a business that you want to buy, even if it's a family business or a friend's business, or you go onto there's a great website. I don't know the name. It's like Biz Buy Sell is the website. I had a few listings on there when I was helping other entrepreneurs sell the business. Biz Buy Sell. Cool. So you can buy a business, search for a business here, and you can like shop businesses. Integrative health and age management clinic and wellness focused community. Sounds interesting. Profitable yacht charter business, $375,000. Let's take a look at it. Turnkey. So cash. But anyways, I'm just kind of showing you that there's a marketplace for this. That if you're interested in buying a business one day, some interesting pictures here. Yeah, let's get out of here. You get in trouble. All right, so you get the idea. And maybe you look through this a little bit. Maybe you set up some alerts. And obviously, if you call or contact these people and you have some legitimacy to you, they're interested in talking to you. It's like buying a house. They have usually brokers. You could be speaking directly with the owner if you contact them, and you can negotiate. This is a specialized service established in 2022. It's fully operational. I bet you could have a family. You could search industries. I bet you could only search family business. I wonder if that's an option in here. Keyword family. Let's see. Integrative health, wellness, coded as well as a family-owned Asian restaurant, $800,000. I mean, how cool is this? And so you can get some. This is how much they pay in rent. It was established in 1987. See if they have any details of financials. They furniture fixtures, $100,000. Facilities, competition, growth. Reason for selling: owners are approaching retirement and wish to pass the business on to someone. WH. The business is established franchise, business website. Fascinating, fascinating, fascinating stuff. Okay, so you get the idea. So there's a lot of advantages to buying an existing company, and that's the point. And that you can find out a lot of information there. You can hedge some of your risk. There are some downsides to it. If you were to buy a business that they lie to you about the financials and that there was something you didn't know, you didn't do your due diligence well enough, and you buy the business, you spend all the money, you sign the contract, and then you find out this information that, oh, by the way, all the employees are planning on leaving you in 2 months. And it's like, what the heck? So there is an element of surprise that can come from purchasing an existing company. Quantify your investment, consider your talents and lifestyle, see the big picture. Sources of leads about businesses available for purchase include suppliers, distributors, trade associations, and even bankers. Do your due diligence. I mentioned that. Relying on professionals. A buyer should seek the help of outside experts. If you're thinking about buying a business, contacting a business broker would be good, especially accountants and lawyers. Finding out why the business is for sale. Remember, we saw that person said they want to retire. The seller's real reasons for selling may or may not be stated once. They may say that, well, the company's not performing well. We really suck at what we do, and I hate the industry, so I want out. They're not going to tell you that. But there's probably a portion of them on the inside. They're screaming that. Hey, I got to tell you the truth. This business sucks, and I hate everything about it. And please get me out of here. I'm trapped. Blink twice if you need help. And I'm blinking over here. But they're not going to state that. They're going to be like, oh, I just want to retire, or I'm getting old, and I'm just thinking it's the right time. But there's something underneath the surface that you want to figure out. Examine the financial data, the company's financial statements and tax returns for the past 3 or 5 years. Very important to have that information. It would be really good if you could get it audited prior to getting it, because it's validated in some way by an accountant. And so usually the business owner won't say yes to that, but that's kind of what you want to do. So I want to summarize really, because I think that the powerful nature of family firms is one that you're going to hear throughout your business career. About 50% of businesses in the US are somehow family owned or family ran. And I believe there's a lot of credibility in a family firm. And I do wish and hope that all of you in some way will participate in this market, either as intelligent, inquisitive customers, as investors in family firms, as participants in family firms, or as people who take on the leadership role within a family firm. And I'd be happy to share more insight as we continue on through the semester. Obviously, I'm very passionate about it. I've been involved in the family business for a long, long time. And I'd be happy to help any of you. If you're struggling with any personal situations, I'd be happy to listen to you and to ask you questions about what are your best options moving forward. But for tonight, I'm done. Hopefully you enjoyed some of my talking, and I certainly enjoyed our conversation in the beginning. And thank you for dealing with my K-pop Demon Hunters little video. That was fun. And I'll see you all on Thursday night. It's inspirational when you reflect on some of these leaders that one might consider to be heroes and think about their lives